Hi, I'm Ryan Brenizer, a New York City wedding photographer, and I'm here today to talk about my best practices for post-production in wedding photography. We have done now well over 450 weddings. We shoot an average of 65 weddings per year. And that sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but by volume, the most work that almost any wedding photographer does is here in the studio. Once you're done with the wedding, taking the images in, making those choices to show which images you want to edit and the best ways to edit them to show your personal vision. So one of the main things about being a professional wedding photographer is that you need to be paranoid so your clients don't have to be. So when we're initially taking our files back from the wedding, it's always about keeping this one principle in mind, which is that your data, your files, your photos do not exist until they exist in more than one place. So, on the wedding day itself, we've already backed it up, 3 different ways, at the wedding. It's been shot once, it's been shot to the backup card, and, at the wedding itself, we also back it up to a laptop. But we want to make sure that everything is perfect. We want to be super paranoid so that your clients don't have to be. So then we want to come in and we want to re-ingest it, into our folder in our desktop at our studio. And we want to do that as soon as possible, ideally the night of the wedding or the very first thing that next morning. We also have things like here the program Carbon Copy Cloner to clone that file to 2 other hard drives, one that we run daily, one that we run weekly. So I come in, I've organized all of these by date. We have all of the files now in our computer. And now I want to make some selections about which ones do we actually want to give to the client. And the program that I use for that is Photo Mechanic. This is a program that was devised for sports shooters, photojournalists, people who shoot a lot of images and have to sort through them, which certainly is true of wedding photographers. I've learned over the years that it is better to edit in, by which we mean the difference between editing in or editing out is you have all these images. You can either go through and select all the ones you don't like to take them out, or you can go through and you can select all the ones you do like and mark them to keep them in. When you edit in, when you select just the ones that you really want to give, you tend to become more selective. You tend to become thinking about these images that you really do like. We might have shot 3,000 to 10,000 photos on a long day with multiple photographers. A little bit of selectivity helps. Not only do you want to take the most creative images and we want to keep those, but we also want to do things like make sure that we include photos of as many guests as possible, that we include photos of a lot of the details, that we include a lot of variety of all sorts in our set. So those are things that we're thinking about as we're editing through. So now I import the photos into Lightroom. Again, I've used a lot of different kinds of raw processing programs, but these days Lightroom is pretty much the industry standard because it has a great workflow, and workflow really matters. What I do is I will import, and I will actually give all of these images the same import preset, and I do that for a sense of consistency. Of course, I'm going to edit each of them individually from here, but it gives a kind of feeling these are all from the same shoot, these are all from the same photographer. It gives that feeling of consistency to that wedding and to the images that I produce. So now we've got a lot of photos to deal with. Here we've got almost 1,200 photos, and it's a hard task. It's something. This is something that more than anything, more than things on the wedding day, this is what gets wedding photographers down. About being a wedding photographer, it's these endless nights of kind of being Sisyphus pushing a stone up a hill. So it helps to first of all develop techniques for efficiency, but it also helps to break this big task down into smaller tasks. One of the really strong things about developing a good Lightroom workflow is trying to get the best out of the batch processing. Lightroom is great at batch processing. You can either copy and paste settings, or you can select one image and synchronize all of that image's settings with other images. So one of the things that I found is really helpful for that is I use the metadata panel here. There's a lot of different ways that you can sort images. Here we've got them sorted by file type, they're all raw, sorted by the cameras that we shot them with, sorted by lenses even, you can see all the lenses here. And the last thing that I do is I'll sort by flash state, which means did the flash fire or did it not? And the reason that that is particularly helpful is that, for example, when I turn on all of the images where we used a flash, not only then am I breaking the project down a little bit, I'm dealing with 325 images instead of 1,100 something, but all these images, at least from a particular time, they look very similar. They have a very similar light temperature. Because you can see, for example, here we were bouncing the flash off a wooden wall, which makes this all kind of an orangey light. So if I take the white balance down, if I bring it down here to kind of greenish, 3350, a lot better balanced for that light source. Now I can really synchronize a lot of images, synchronize them all to that same white balance. And again, none of these images have had anything done to them yet, so I can just synchronize a lot of things, make sure that they're all the same. And it gives me a really, really good starting point. Lightroom also has a semi-hidden tool that can help you in this process. So one of the things, it's very handy to shoot manual when you can, to have a lot of control over your images, make sure you're putting a similar output of exposure out for a lot of images in a row. It does make your post-processing easier, but sometimes you'll be in situations where it's actually less consistent to shoot manual, such as in a scenario like this, where people are always wandering in and out of bright sunlight and open shade. So it makes some sense to shoot aperture priority, and so we did. And so some of these images will be a little bit darker than the others. So even if we just do a normal batch process, still you're going to have some images darker than others right here. So what we want to do is use this secret hidden Lightroom menu item to make all of these images exposed exactly the same. And that tool is called Match Total Exposures. Weirdly, you have to set up for it in the library setting. So here we select all of our images whose exposures we want to match, and you extra select, or you start with the image that you want to match to, the image that you believe is exposed entirely correctly. And so you can see these images are select, they're brighter than the rest, but the one we're matching to is like even brighter than that. That's the sign that you have it set up. Weirdly, you cannot actually select this menu item in the library module. You have to go into the develop, and then you can go into your settings and match total exposures, and it will just kind of happen. And so what happens is, you take an image like this, it's up by about half a stop, but the next image, in the series was shot a stop darker. The shutter speed was twice as high, and so Lightroom will just automatically move it up to about 1.5 stops, so that it looks like it was shot exactly the same. Now you want to be careful. You don't want to do this if you're shooting in low light, because in ISO 3200 or 6400 image, bumped up 2 stops will probably not look so great. But here, outside, open shade, sometime when you're shooting ISO 100, ISO 64, you have a lot of leeway there, and that can make this process just nice and easy. So from here, again, you can also make things easy on yourself by not being afraid to use these little quick develop tools on the right side. So here we've got a lot of images. We've matched the exposure so they all look more or less the same. And now we're going to have to go in and edit all of these. We're going to have to do some cropping and things like that. But we can see, like, okay, maybe this is a little hot still. We want to take it down by 1/3 of a stop. And so just by clicking that little decrease, we'll take them all down by the same amount. And again, because we've matched the exposures, they're all kind of starting from the same place, even if they were shot a little bit differently. We might also say little things like, maybe it's a little cool, maybe we want to bring these highlights down. You can, just sort of tweak your batch editing to make this all really, really fast and handy, and then go in for things like cropping and processing, dodging and burning, and things like that. So with some cameras like older Canons, like the old Fuji DSLRs, like the Fuji S5, you'd want to shoot a little bit overexposed because that's where the dynamic range lived. You could pull it back down. With the new Nikon cameras like I shoot with, most of that dynamic range tends to live in the shadow areas. So dodging and burning is a really, really useful tool. It's something that I do a little bit more of than I used to because I want to just guide the eye. What we want to do sometimes with images like this, where an important moment happened and they wandered right into that space between bright sunlight and the shadows, we shot it dark deliberately so that we could maintain all of this tonality here. Actually see the sky instead of blowing it out. This, of course, is not an image that we would want to deliver like this to clients. We want to process it, which is what we're doing here. So I want to make sure we've got our light balance correct, bring it up to kind of the shade value. As again, with Lightroom, there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. So you could bring up your shadows, and already you're most of the way there. Just bringing up your shadows, playing with the black dot values there. I may also want to be even a little bit more selective. So I'm going to bring my shadows back down just a little bit to kind of keep that shadow tone here in the trees, which I don't care as much about. And then I'm going to use a little dodging and burning. I'm going to use this brush tool up here. And what I like to do, this is totally a matter of personal preference, but I will put the settings like all the way up and have my flow very low. So if I really wanted to keep working on it a lot, I could go super nuclear with it, but it takes a long time to get there because I don't want to go super nuclear. I don't want people really thinking about the post-processing. I want them thinking about the moment, maybe thinking about the photo, but particularly I want them to feel like they're there. So I want to just provide some subtlety with a large, soft brush, making sure that the eye is looking on the areas of the photo that I want them to look at. We're looking at the faces here. Maybe I'm just opening up these shadows where they're darkest just a little bit more, but I'm keeping that sense that it is a little bit darker to the left side of the frame where it's shadows and trees than bright sky over here, but I'm helping myself just get as much of that possible into the frame. So again, their faces may have been shot probably a little bit more than 3 stops underexposed, but again, because of the camera we're using, recent Nikon, because also it was shot at ISO 100, we know that's in the safe zone. We know that's in fact the best way that we can shoot if our goal is to get both sky and shadows, get both white wedding dress in the sunlight and dark suit in the shadow tones here. Doesn't apply to every scenario. This isn't something that you'll want to do if you're shooting at ISO 6400 already, or even something like ISO 3200. You're not going to want to go from there, add 3 more stops unless you really like noise. So another thing that we deal with all the time in wedding photography is very, very weird white balances. When we come in, we're shooting in all kinds of different light, sometimes like lasers, and so we're always shooting raw. We will shoot a large amount of the time in sort of auto white balance, which is basically just saying, hey guys, forget it, let's do the white balance later. White balance doesn't really exist in any major way in raw photos in the first place. It allows you to set it later. And so sometimes we'll come in and we'll have photos that look like this, that look very, very orange, and or even just slightly off. But we know one of the things that we're doing over and over and over again on wedding days is setting white balance. One of the things that I've learned is we're always looking for white areas, neutral gray areas to set white balance on. Now, of course, you very often have a white thing to set white balance on in wedding photos, which is the bride's dress. You also have things like whites of the eyes and things like that. But it's very, very common for things in this world to be off-white. People's teeth are not perfectly white. The whites of their eyes are not actually perfectly white. And just it's very popular in fashion, even bridal fashion, for things to be off-white. But there is no fashion color called off-black. So often, when you have people with tuxedos, with suits, you will often find a better and more accurate white balance if you're white balancing off of those suits. If you're white balancing off of the tuxedo, it might come in a little bit better, at least give you a different option, for when you don't have, somebody standing there with a white card. Just to keep in mind that, yeah, you can, white balance off of black as long as it's in the light, and it'll get you probably not perfect, but it'll get you close. Here, got us the temperature just about right. We see this is a super, super, super warm image. It took us all the way down to 2000 K. It came in just a shade green. So we can adjust that. But with such an extremely orange image, being able to get us close to the correct white balance with one click is something that's very, very helpful. So don't forget the gray tones and don't forget the blacks. A lot of times they're going to be a lot truer to something that you can get white balance off of than a dress that might be ecru or all the different fashion types for off-white that I don't even know. So Photoshop is really great at doing a lot of things very quickly, or at least I'm very practiced in that. And so one of the things that I will do a lot for people is just little subtle skin editing. We can do a lot of it in Lightroom, especially with like the clone and heel brush. But for little things like some discoloration in the skin, Photoshop is perfect at that. So one of the tools that we have here, again, we have, she's got fantastic, great skin, but she's actively laughing, so we've got just a little redness, like a little redness in the nose. But if we use the hue and saturation tool, which here is under image adjustments, and what you want to do is, if we want to correct just like this little redness in the nose, just bring it down a little bit. What I do is I'll kind of like hit it with a sledgehammer first. So basically when I come in, when I select our reds, and what I want to do is I bring these sliders in, so I'm selecting almost nothing, and I just change my hue all the way so that anything that is selected is going to be just radically changed into some kind of weird clownish color. And then by pressing Shift, that says, we see this plus added to the dropper here, and that says that this color, anything this color that I click on, and keep pressing Shift, add it in, is going to be affected. And then if we want to say, oh, I went a little too far, if I press Option, we have the minus, and I click on that, it says anything that is this color is not going to be affected. So now, here as you can see, we've got redness in his face, redness in her nose and cheeks, and of course lips, affected. Now, first of all, we don't want to make that all bright turquoise. This is a very particular kind of look that probably clients don't want. So instead of having our hue up to 180, we might take it back down and turn it just up, here, watch it go up and down with the arrow key, ending up about just +6 here. And then if we want to, we can take the saturation down, again, just a little, because taking the saturation down too much is very strange. So saturation down just -3, -5. And now we hit OK. Now I might say, well, that looks great, but I don't want to take out the redness in her lips. And so now what I'll do is I'll go up to my history. I will select these changes that I've just made. I'll click this little box on the left, which says, when I go back, when I undo to where I was, this, because I've got that little brush right there, is going to be my active target for my history brush. So now I make sure that my opacity and my flow are up at 100%, and I can just instantly brush in these changes that I've made, taking out just some of that little redness. You can see, do I want to take out any of his, just a little bit here. And we've made a very subtle change, but it can make a big difference for people. For people who, if you're doing an engagement shoot in 15-degree weather, which I've done a lot, you might use this tip a lot to get redness out of the ears, nose, entire face. It's just, can be used also for people that don't have as good complexions as this, just to kind of, even that out. It's a very, very handy thing. It would take you a while to do in Lightroom. It's very, very fast to do in Photoshop. So that's one of my favorite tips. So now we've gone through this whole process. Not only have we shot the wedding, we've backed the wedding up in like many different places. We've gone into photo mechanics, sorted the wedding out into the images that we want to deliver, and we've brought those images into Lightroom first to edit them, to go through the cropping, the color, the exposure, to make them as good as possible. We've done dodging and burning, and any images that needed extra work with fine detail, things like skin blotchiness, things like maybe a slight liquefy, whatever we needed, we've exported into Photoshop, and now we've exported all these images, and it's time to give them to the clients. There's lots of different services that you can use to deliver images to your clients well. We just really are enjoying the look of Pixieset right now, with this big splash page, because you want to have just a lot of impact to your images. And so another way to have impact is that we will break out highlights into this initial set, images that we say, like these are the ones that you should look at. But we also do it because then it gives them guidance for the album making process, because they've already, they've seen these first. We said to them like, these are the images that we, as photographers, as experts, feel are the best ones from the wedding. We know you're going to feel, differently about them. We all encounter images in different ways, based on our experiences, especially when they are images of ourselves, of our friends, and our family. They're going to have some differences, but by giving them this guidance, we're going to, be able to work with them much more easily in creating an album that we love and that also, more importantly, they love as well. So I hope that helps you in your post-wedding, post-production process. These are some of my best practices. I'm Ryan Brenizer, New York City wedding photographer. Thank you so much for watching.